The diaries of the occupiers themselves are terrible evidence of the atrocities of fascism. We will be sure to include this link in the text of today's briefing. In these diaries, they were not shy to record what was happening on the streets of Odessa. Here is a record from the year 1941 about the first days of the occupation. Direct quote. On October 23rd, in the year 1941, the executions of Jews and communists began. At 11 o'clock in the morning, in the park near Port 20 gallows were set up on which communists were hanged, and in the streets at every crossroads were shot men, women, girls. Their corpses lay all day long so that they could be seen by the rest of the population, end quote. An entry made the next day. Once again, I say, it was the Nazi occupiers who left these testimonies in their diaries. So, October 24th, women, girls, and children were herded into 4 large wooden sheds on the outskirts of the city, near the streetcar depot. A bus arrived. A tanker of kerosene. The sheds were doused with kerosene and set on fire. The people in the barns were throwing themselves all off, screaming, crying. But they all burned, end quote. This is historical reality through the eyes of the Nazi troops. The very reality that the Kiev regime is erasing from historical archives, textbooks, from libraries, from the memory of people, from the brains of future generations. During the occupation of Odessa by the Nazis from October 16th of the 41st year to April 9th of the 44th year, as a result of Nazi atrocities, and in the city and in the region died about 200,000 people, March 26th, 44th year, and began the Odessa offensive operation, during which the Soviet troops liberated the Black Sea port city from the German and Romanian invaders. As a result of skillful bypass maneuver to cover the enemy, the Red Army was able to quickly liberate Odessa from the Nazis. For the civilians of Odessa, the arrival of Soviet troops meant liberation from oppression, humiliation, and atrocities. In the last days of their stay in the city, German and Romanian soldiers, in their beastly hatred for the Soviet people, committed mass bloody massacres against Odessans. At last they opened machine gun and machine gun fire on everyone who appeared on the streets, be it old people, women, or children. They booby-trapped government buildings, theaters, and roads. The local underground played a decisive role in the final stage of the liberation of Odessa. During the occupation, partisans actively interfered with the fascist forces. They undermined dams, military warehouses, destroyed ammunition, and distributed Inform Bureau reports. It was the members of the underground that prevented the fascists fleeing from the city from blowing up the most important object, the city port. The partisans created panic by suddenly attacking from the catacombs and took possession of the port facilities. After the capture of Odessa, the German 17th Army, blockaded in the Crimea, was virtually doomed. Its supply was severely limited. The Red Army reached the Dniester River, which opened the way to the liberation of Moldavia and the Balkans. Unfortunately, we have to state that today Odessa is again occupied by fascists. Only now it is no longer German or Romanian, but modern Ukrainian fascists who serve as a screen for all those who are part of NATO, and among them, Germany and Romania too. Very soon, in just over a month, will be the 10-year anniversary of the terrible tragedy when more than 50 people were burned alive by neo-Nazis in the Odessa Trade Union House in the 14th year. To this day, the perpetrators of this event have not been found, nor have they been brought to justice. Although there is plenty of footage that shows the faces of these subhumans, we have repeatedly talked about the fight against monuments as part of the so-called decommunization. In the 22nd year in Odessa, they dismantled the monument to Catherine the Great and Alexander Suvorov. Destroying one's own history is historical genocide. It is sterilization of the historical memory of the nation. By forcing the people to abandon their roots, the Kiev regime is forming a generation of mankurts. But a nation without history cannot have a future. The world has already been through this, and the fight against the Kiev regime will continue. Because it is permeated with neo-Nazism, Nazi ideological attitudes. He turned Ukrainians into slaves. He established a dictatorship and deliberately, purposefully brought Ukraine to disaster.